don't want to go around insulting people. I don't want to paint with a broad brush. Every immigrant is this, every African American is that, every, other person with, different religious beliefs or whatever. That's childish.
What do you think of Cory Booker's, and you didn't comment on him, and you feel free
to. I
adore
adore him.
What do you think about him saying kicked him in the shins, essentially? Start to get to that kind of political.
Well, that was Eric Holder.
Yeah, Eric Holder, yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know they all look alike.
No, they don't. Oh, well done.
Black Lives Matter. Everybody's talking about this new thing called Black Lives Matter. But this is what it is really about. All lives matter.
No, lives don't matter in this world and age. I don't know if you know that, but unless you're white and pretty and white in the world, then nobody gives a fuck about you. You're gonna die and you're gonna get shot probably by a police officer.
Do you hear this shit?
So I'm set though. I'm good. Yeah, this motherfucker though, he's pretty screwed. Yeah, sorry.
Do you hear this shit?
It's rough.
You hear this shit? This is going on Facebook, so y'all heard this shit.
It's true though. That's the worst fucking part.
See this?
I'm drunk right now, so I'm just speaking the illiterate truth.
This is what many Americans think about this.
This is legit.
I hope I never see this person again, and I hope they never see me again. I might not have to post this.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. Now, every election cycle, every 2 or 4 years, we start to see all of this propaganda, and we have the same old conversation about the black vote. And recently at the White House, Donald Trump just hosted a young black leadership convention, and a lot of young black conservatives, who I guess they're trying to say are going to be our future leaders, and they were in there cheering about making America great again. I don't know when it was great for them, but they were there to celebrate making America great again. Now, this event was hosted by Turning Point USA, which was started by Charlie Kirk, with the help of Candace Owens. And this whole Black Conservative Summit was supposed to be Candace Owens' idea. And she's trying to push something called Blexit, which is a horrible name, but she even had to imitate that from Europeans. But she's trying to start a movement to get black people to leave the Democratic plantation for the Republican plantation.
Made America's somewhat toxic political atmosphere these days. Hillary Clinton's facing a backlash after jibing that African Americans, quote, all look alike, end quote. She was correcting an interviewer who mixed up 2 Democrat politicians.
What do you think of Cory Booker's, and you didn't comment on him, and you feel free
I adore him.
What do you think about him saying kicked him in the shins, essentially? Start to get to that kind of political.
Well, that was Eric Holder.
Yeah, Eric Holder,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know they all look alike.
No, they don't. Oh, well done.
Well, many fired back at Clinton on Twitter about that, dubbing her racist for joking in such a way. Others suggested if it had been Donald Trump, for instance, uttering the same line, the outrage would have been much more vocal. All this comes as many high-profile African Americans are calling on others in the black community to ditch their support for the Democratic Party, who've long been a pillar of the Democrats' base.
The Blexit movement will spend 2019 holding rallies in every major city in America that the Democrats have destroyed. Just admit that the people blacks are doing better under the Trump presidency. This logo, these colors, were created by my dear friend and fellow superhero, Kanye West.
Was there ever a point history where white privilege did exist.
Yeah, I suppose when we lived in a country where if you were black, you were not allowed to go into certain places.
When did it end?
When it stopped being systemic, when there stopped being laws in place that stopped me as a black person doing what you are able to do as a white man. If you ask me whether or not I believe in economic privilege, I would tell you yes. If you ask me whether or not I think that somebody born into a family of billionaires will be afforded more privileges in life than somebody that is born in the projects of Chicago, I would say yes, because economic privilege in this country does exist. But there is no law in place that is stopping a person because of the color of their skin from gaining that economic privilege, which is why I do not believe that white privilege, which is based upon the color of your skin, exists. If you're asking me, do I think the black community has been crippled economically, the answer would be yes. It has been crippled economically by Democrat policies. You just heard me say that in there.
Democrats are Americans. Democrats are in America, so therefore you just admitted that there has been disadvantages by two black people by Democrats who are Americans. You just admitted it.
It is not based off. You asked me if white privilege exists. The answer is white privilege. Because you're born white, that means you're going to not have this or that. It does not exist. No. This is what I love about white liberals, right? Like, they know it's so important for them to sell us our oppression that they'll come up and tell us we're under grace. Just say it.
Can you speak for all black people?
Well, why don't you stop speaking for black people? That would be great, okay?
I'm not.
Why don't you let him, who's shaking his head and rolling your eyes, speak about his experience as a black man?
We can have a conversation later.
No, because you're sitting here yelling at me, telling me, and I'm telling you the answer. Economic privilege exists. You're saying why does it disproportionately affect blacks? Because we're disproportionately voting for Democrats, and it's stupid.
Now, first of all, with Candace Owens, I'm not sure if she believes everything she says herself. It sounds like she just mimics Ben Shapiro. To me, it just feels like she's doing it to get paid. Now, somebody like Sheriff David Clark, I believe he believes what he says. I think he believes every word. But as far as black conservatives, most of their arguments is why not to be a Democrat. Most of their talking points are about how bad the Democrats are and not how good the Republicans are. Their main talking point is why are black people still Democrats? I believe black people are still Democrats because we generally prefer racism with a smile. Voting between Democrats and Republicans is voting whether we like overt racism or covert racism. Which one do we prefer? On one hand, conservatives will tell you, well, there's no racism. Up until it's a white person who calls himself a liberal, then they can see racism and white privilege and point it out. And anybody who tells you racism is only in one group, whether it be political or it be financial, it doesn't matter. We live in a complete system of white supremacy. It's everywhere. And the irony is the poor white people who tell us to leave the Democratic plantation want us to come to the Republican plantation. And all the things they say about Democrats and black people, they can't see Republicans are doing to them and keeping them in the trailer parks. They've bought into the illusion of whiteness, whether they admit it or not. And for them, throughout history, that has been more important than class or gender. But for whatever reason, their high IQs can't figure that out. And most of their talking points are the same talking points that have been debunked 50 years ago. People like James Baldwin debunked most of these talking points, especially black conservatives. They say you can't use slavery as a reason to be a victim. Slavery was so long ago. But then they'll turn around and say, well, the Democratic Party was the party of slavery. And don't even realize they contradict themselves in the same sentences. When in reality, there was no party of slavery. It was on both sides. And many people bring up the Civil War and say, well, many white people fought to end slavery. When the Civil War was never about slavery, it was about taxes. The North wanted in on that money the South was making from all of that slavery, from all that tobacco, all that cotton. And they try to say Abraham Lincoln was a Republican who freed the slaves. But Lincoln did not free the slaves, and he was racist as hell. And when the North started losing, then Abraham Lincoln went to the black people and said, I'll give you freedom if you help me fight. But technically, he was killed before it even passed. It was a Democrat who actually passed the 13th Amendment. So you can't even say it was Republicans who freed the slaves. In fact, it was a Republican president, Rutherford B. Hayes, that decided to end Reconstruction, which helped bring on Jim Crow. But these black Republicans will tell you, well, the KKK is the party of the Democrats. But again, that's not between party lines. That's just a white society thing. But the only information they can find that is racist happened to be from the Democrats, like Lyndon B. Johnson. Yeah, he was racist as hell. He set up the Civil Rights Bill to be a detriment to us. And Martin Luther King eventually realized it, but it was too late. But he was a Democrat. The governor of Alabama, George Wallace, who was the Trump of his era. But he was a Democrat. But they don't bring up Ronald Reagan, who was caught on tape saying racist stuff about black people. They don't bring up war on drugs, which goes against those conservative values. They conveniently skip over Richard Nixon and his war on drugs. But they can tell you about Bill Clinton. They seem to skip over how when black people was talking about gun rights, the Republicans were completely against it. And Democrats too. But it was the NRA who finally agreed to gun laws. And to be real, when you look at the definition of conservative, I think most black people would be conservative. But these people who identify as conservative, they want the government to stay out of your business up until it's something that they don't agree with. Then they want the government all in your business. They literally go against their own values when it comes to war, whether it be a war in Afghanistan or the war on drugs. In most cases, it is them who is calling the police on us for minding our own business. But they can see everybody else's hypocrisy but their own. Even Kanye had to distance himself from this movement and from Candace Owens. And Kanye went out the way to say he's not involved in their movement anymore.
It was something about when I put this hat on, it made me feel like Superman.
Well, turns out Kanye West is actually taking a step up, and away from politics.
Run away from me, baby. Run away.
Less than a month after this happened.
If he don't look good, we don't look good. This is our president. He has to be the freshest, the flyest.
I'll tell you what, that was pretty impressive.
The rapper went on a lengthy Twitter spree to share why he's had a change of heart. Quote, "I've been used to spread messages I don't believe in. I am distancing myself from politics and completely focusing on being creative. I support creating jobs and opportunities for people who need them the most. I support prison reform. I support common sense gun laws that will make our world safer. I support those who risk their lives to serve and protect us, and I support holding people who misuse their power accountable. I believe in love and compassion for people seeking asylum and parents who are fighting to protect their children from violence and war. I would like to thank my family, loved ones, and community for supporting my actual beliefs and my vision for a better world."
They keep us so focused on history that we start to believe that it actually repeats itself. And we become overly traditional, and we can't advance as a race of beings. We get too caught up in the past and what everyone's saying and what everyone's tweeting, and sometimes you just have to be fearless enough to break the simulation.
It's been a very controversial year for Kanye. In May, he came under massive fire for calling slavery, quote, "a choice." In August, Jimmy Kimmel left him stumped.
There are literally families being torn apart as a result of what this president is doing. And I think that, we cannot forget that whether we like his personality or not, his actions are really what matter. I mean, you so famously and so powerfully said George Bush doesn't care about black people. It makes me wonder what makes you think that Donald Trump does, or any people at all.
Then in September, he was booed during SNL for making a pro-Trump speech on stage.
A white person about this, and they say, "How could you like Trump? He's racist." Well, if I was concerned about racism, I would have moved out of America a long time ago. Now you got a situation where we need to have a dialogue and not a diatribe. And that is bothers me.
Now, even Kanye had to step away from them because they're taking it too far. And it'll be one thing if they were just saying leave the Democratic Party, but they're trying to encourage you to support Donald Trump and racist policies that's going to affect them themselves. They want us to support people who support stop and frisk, which is a violation of the Constitution and also against conservative values. But they themselves want to be subject to stop and frisk based off false statistics. Most of these black conservatives are, well, what about black on black crime people? And they're talking about free thinking when they're only regurgitating talking points that white people have. But because some white dude who probably on opioids and got away with rape talk about how black people commit more of the crime, they just run with it. But they don't even understand themselves where they get these talking points from and how flawed these statistics are. But before anybody called me a Democrat, which they love to do, anybody still pushing the Democratic Party on you, you got to look at them sideways at this point. Because as bad as the Republican history is, the Democratic history is just as bad. But we still sit here and argue about which slave master is better. Do we prefer the Democratic covert plantation, or do we want the Republican overt plantation? When in reality, both sides do the same thing, and they always try to find ways to justify our blood being shed or our children's blood being shed. Now, this young brother, Donye Jones, was hung outside of his mother's house, so she found him when she walked outside. Imagine seeing your son hanging when you come outside in the morning.
Down the actual facts tonight, Ashley.
Courtney and Steve, I've been talking to St. Louis County Police to try to get answers to the many questions Jones's family has. Donye's relatives tell me before the suicide, they were getting death threats, and they believe it's all connected to his mother's involvement in the Ferguson's protests.
Suicidal? Ready to leave his mother? No. Nope. A mother knows her child.
That's why Melissa Mckinnies wants St. Louis County Police to dig deeper into her son's death.
He was not suicidal.
On October 17th, she found Donye hanging from this tree in their backyard with bruises on his face. And this is her post that's been shared across America.
He was in good spirits.
McKinnies says the 24-year-old wasn't depressed and was starting a real estate business. She believes there's more to this story.
He said somebody took my son.
McKinnies, a prominent Ferguson activist, told me she thinks her family is being targeted. In the last 2 months, she says they've been getting death threats through social media, and those threats recently showed up at her doorstep.
They watched my house, and when my husband and my son would approach the car, they would drive off.
I asked her how she could link these threats to her involvement in Ferguson. She would not go into detail tonight. She also told me she never reported these threats to police. And I asked why not.
Because we felt like we had this, you know.
The St. Louis County coroner says Donye's autopsy won't be ready for weeks, and they will not give News 4 any preliminary reports.
That's my baby. It hurts.
St. Louis County Police told us for now this remains a suicide investigation.
Saying that he committed suicide? No. You're going to respect him.
Both the family and police did say there was a chair near his body. However, family members told me the sheets used to hang him did not come from their house, and the knots used to tie the sheets were advanced, so they don't believe Donye would have been capable of making.
And the police, regardless of their political affiliation, is going to tell the parents that, well, it's suicide. And they said they're going to investigate it, but not as a murder. They're not going to look for any suspects. Because they believe this young brother, Donye Jones, beat himself up and then hung himself with some sheets that he went out and bought. But we don't protect our kids. We argue about which political party should do it for us. Which white savior is going to be best for us. But unless we got a candidate who we brought up ourselves, who was in our corner, who was there to push our agenda, who was funded by us, and that we can hold accountable, then it's all irrelevant. Until then, we got to stop getting caught up in other tribal divisions that have nothing to do with us. We have enough problems of our own. We have enough divisions of our own. We have to be focused on protecting ourselves and our children and giving them the best opportunity in the future. If not, they'll continue to go through the same things that we go through right now.
USA! 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 I say, vote for me. What the hell do you have to lose?
What is the new political movement that's got America talking?
Blexit.
It's called Blexit, or Black Exit. The goal is to get African Americans who traditionally support the Democratic Party to ditch them in favour of the Republicans.
I'm convinced that liberals hate black conservatives.
It's been started by a group of conservative African Americans, and they have a Blexit website, and on that website are a number of what they call truths, reasons they believe that black Americans shouldn't vote Democrat. So how true are these truths? Well, let's start with this one. which is about the KKK, the racist white supremacist group. The Blexit website claims that the Democrats created the KKK. So, is this claim true? Well, let's ask our political reporter, Anthony Zerka.
Okay, so the KKK was started by people who were Democrats in the years after the Civil War, the late 1860s. But it wasn't founded by the Democratic Party, and there were Republicans who became members. But it's true that back in those days, its membership was predominantly Democratic, as it was in the early 20th century rebirth. Well, now there's been a complete shift. The Democrats have disavowed the KKK, as have most Republicans. But there have been some members of the KKK, such as David Duke, who have run for public office as Republicans.
And that's the thing here, the Blexiters, let's call them that, are right. It was the Democratic Party which supported and promoted slavery, and it was indeed a Republican president, this man, who ended it. Which takes us to the next set of claims on their site, that Democratic politicians condoned some of the most heinous acts of violence against African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement, and that President Harry Truman wrote a letter in which he said, Negroes ought to be in Africa.
Okay, so during the Civil Rights Movement, the 1950s and 1960s, Democratic Southern politicians did support and condone racial segregation. And as for that letter, those words were written by Harry Truman back in 1911, 34 years before he would go on to become the U.S. president. And while in office, he desegregated the military and pushed his party to oppose racism and discrimination.
And that's the thing here, the change in views from President Truman reflected the change in views of the Democratic Party. And by the 1960s, it was the Democrats who were pushing to end segregation and white-only public spaces.
President Lyndon Baines Johnson pushed the Democratic Party to support black rights. That won the Democrats' support of African Americans across the South, but white Democrats weren't happy, and they switched parties to the Republicans.
The Republicans moved to the right, and the Democrats became the party of choice for an overwhelming number of African Americans in successive elections. Of course, there are African Americans who vote Republican, but President Trump thinks he can get more to do so.
Democrat policies have led to unsafe communities, failing schools, over-incarceration.
He's got a job on his hands. In 2016, Donald Trump won only 8% of African American votes. So it's going to take a lot more than Blexit to turn that figure around.
An all-out hunt underway for this woman whose racially charged confrontation in South Park went viral.
Tonight we got our hands on her 911 call. Susan Westwood already facing 4 criminal summons, and now she's facing new charges for what she said during her call to police. The Defender's Nathan Morabito is live at the apartment complex. Nathan, police aren't having luck finding this woman, are they?
They just don't belong here. Those words part of a 5-minute 911 call released by police today. In it, Westwood tells the dispatcher there are people trying to get into the apartment complex behind us who are African American.
They just made me feel intimidated and awful. So whatever you need to do and charge me back, just do it. Because they don't belong here. I don't mean to be awful and rude, but they just don't belong here.
Westwood said the people were hanging out there and filming her. She called it strange and weird and said they were trying to cause problems, begging for money.
I'm not going to stand for it. I send my kids to Myers Park High School. Just get them the f*** out of here right now.
We are so distraught and still very upset.
Lisa and Mary Garris said they were waiting on AAA at the Camden Fairview earlier this month when they said Westwood started harassing them.
I'm white and I'm hot.
Video taken by the pair shows Westwood telling the women she's white and hot.
Still going to make $125,000 Monday morning.
And makes $125,000. Westwood's former employer confirmed this week she no longer has a job there. Today, Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles commended the police department for its response. In a tweet adding, "The ugly sentiment expressed in a 911 call released today doesn't reflect our city's values, that everyone is deserving of respect and dignity." And CMPD told us today when its officers tried to serve that misuse of 911 warrant yesterday, they couldn't find Westwood. That's why they are now asking for the public's help. So if you know where this woman is tonight, CMPD wants to hear from you.
Right now at 10, students stand arm in arm in a show of unity. They condemn their school for failing to take action against racism.
And it's not just saying the N-word in the hallways that's hurtful. It comes in many forms.
And this all came to a head when a student was called the N-word and then suspended for how she reacted.
Tom Durian talked to students who took their complaints straight to the school board. He joins us live now with their reaction. Tom.
That it's nothing new and that the culture here at this school needs to change.
Cops on her. They took away her homecoming. No parent should have to go through this.
Deanna Merritt breaks down when telling the story of her daughter, Shanice Knox. Knox says she was suspended after a verbal confrontation with another student who used a racial slur.
They said that to walk away when I thought I was in the right of confronting her about the N-word and that it should not be said to anyone at any time, anywhere.
Knox told her story today, backed by other students who say the climate inside Greendale High is hostile towards minorities.
We can't walk down the hallway every day without somebody saying a racial slur about us or saying something that is very disrespectful.
Tonight, a group of students took their concerns to the school board meeting.
It's sickening. It is. It's really sickening that we have to do all of this just to get your attention.
That's Herbert Rosh's daughter.
I have fear every day for my little girl that she has to go out and deal with this hate from complete strangers.
Shanice asked that her suspension be overturned, but not before becoming emotional when talking about the discipline.
I hope when you go to bed tonight, this is what you remember. Because each one of you had some way of doing this to her.
Tonight, the superintendent of the district said the students involved have been counseled and that the recent events have opened the door to a much-needed conversation.
I see this as a great opportunity for our students, parents, and community to engage in healthy conversation about race, equity, and opportunities for all students.
Well, in addition to the suspension being overturned, the students and the parents say they're going to be back here at every school board meeting until race and inclusion, a plan to deal with it, is offered by the district.
This is not what you expect to see in your rearview mirror, especially at a stoplight on a Saturday afternoon in Mobile.
The whole time I'm thinking like, hopefully I get out of this okay and I get my sister out of this okay.
Tyra Jones was taking her 16-year-old sister to the mall for a back-to-school outfit. Jones drove us through the scary situation. She exited I-65 and was stopped at the traffic light on Airport Boulevard.
He pulled right here onto this grass, right here. And next thing I know, he was just calling me, his girlfriend or wife was telling me to get out the car. She wanted to fight. He was waving his gun and calling me all kind of, names, prerogatives.
She doesn't know what started it. Jones says she was driving the speed limit and that made the other driver angry.
You're waving a gun at me, that's going to give me the impression that you want to shoot me. And if you want to shoot me, you have the intent to kill, so.
When they pulled out their pistol, Jones didn't reach for hers. She grabbed her phone to take a picture.
It wasn't until I pulled out my phone that they reversed to get away, to leave me alone. She's sharing the picture to warn other drivers and hopefully keep people safe. This is a danger on the road. Right, it is a danger on the road. And I know I'm more than likely not the only person they did like that.